Life is like a circle. You start at the beginning, improve, get promoted, go to the top. And if you're old, you've done this like 5 times in your life in different types of environments. It gets to a point where you just want to tread water for a while, which is a losing battle. You're not getting anywhere. The only end result is death. So here we are at the beginning of another circle. Retirement. Now I can either figure that out or continue to tread water. And you do that by throwing like 10 to 20 things on a piece of paper. And you start drawing arrows back and forth, inside and out. For example, what is the closest star to the Earth? And as you're thinking about that, the brain automatically thinks out, looking at the stars, which is the closest, when you should be thinking inside. So when you're doing your 10 to 20 things on a piece of paper, you're drawing an arrow this way, what if I do that? I draw an arrow that way, how things connect to each other. So if your brain didn't cramp up, after like 5 seconds, you would say the sun. That's the star closest to the Earth. The only way you can keep your brain from cramping up, because most of our life, we're living under this low level of anxiety every single day. It's judgment and pressure from other people. Now for the last 13 years, I worked in a low-level job. I was still managing people, but my goal was to communicate better. Honestly, I've learned how to communicate better on the job, but the personal side, I haven't cracked the code on that. It's sad. So I figured out, before you hire somebody or get married, you submit that person to a series of questions, 7 questions. And they're not trick questions. It lays the groundwork on what you're dealing with. And if you use these questions in different environments, it's an eye-opener. So the 7 questions are, what's the closest star to the Earth? That's probably the most difficult question of the 7. Second question is, how many letters in the alphabet? I'd say probably 20% of the population knows that answer. Part of it is the way the teachers teach now. I know in kindergarten and first grade, the teachers, they used to tell it like it was back in the day. Alright, we got 26 letters in the alphabet, and then they start teaching you all the different letters. The easiest question on this test is, who was the first president of the United States? Which is pretty straightforward. But if you got a person that didn't pay attention to anything in school, they'll tell you Abraham Lincoln. Next question is, what 2 countries border the United States? That would be Canada and Mexico. But I had one person ask me, what does border mean? After you ask somebody all these questions, you'll realize your life isn't so bad, and you're not that stupid. Average intelligence will suffice. Now here's a question that'll cramp your brain up for about 3 seconds. You gotta turn on that switch to have your brain turn on and come up with the obvious answer. What language do the people in Idaho speak? Now, if you let your brain drift in, you're gonna come up with the answer English. But a percentage of the population aren't going to really think about it, and they're going to say Idahoan. One guy said potato. That was a good answer. Or another person said redneck. If you think about that, that's sort of mean, but really funny. So the last 2 questions are, where was the attack on Pearl Harbor? And what country is the Panama Canal? That might be the hardest question. That answer would be Panama and Hawaii. Now, when you got to fine tune, you can come up with different derivative of questions stemming off of those 7 in order to figure out if you should get married to that person or hire that person. Step 2 or part 2 of these questions are, did you graduate high school? And if not, did you get your GED? If those 2 questions fail, you say, do you have a driver's license? If the answer is no to all 3 of those questions, which back in the day would be hard to believe, but it's pretty common nowadays, especially in the environment that I work in now, They'll say they have transportation, but they don't have a driver's license. Knowing that you can't sustain a job when you're running on empty, or you have no opportunities or independence in your life because you've held yourself back. And that's a real answer. Have we held ourselves back? Yes. I've held myself back. So the real issue is running through all those 20 things you threw on a piece of paper, narrow it down, have some compassion towards people, and make it happen. One decision, there is no plan B. Amen. Go out and help somebody.